Simona Halep has announced her retirement. She did play in the Transylvania Open in her home event, but lost quite easily, I suppose, to Lucia Bronzetti, who did reach the final, in fairness, but it was 6-1, 6-1, bit of a thrashing. And so afterwards, she did announce her retirement. What did you make of this news? Is it a big surprise? She's struggled a lot with injuries since coming back. She's only played 6 matches since coming back from her doping ban. And it's a real shame to see her finally hang up her rackets. Chris, I'll come to you first.
It's been not necessarily the comeback she would have hoped for. And I think, irrespective of your views on the doping side of things, I think when you are cleared to play, you then kind of have to move on in some ways and allow the player to compete. And unfortunately, I think the time off really did do some damage from a physical perspective to her. We saw a lot about her posting about still kind of keeping up that training so she was ready to go. But then she went straight back in Miami when that ban was lifted. I think she was very eager to get back, but I think playing as much as she did and some of those matches early on probably did do some damage to her because she wasn't necessarily at match fitness. But I mean, it was at a time of her career when this ban did happen where we did talk about the fact that it would be hard to come back from it given the age that she was at and how physical her tennis is, how much of a counter puncher she is on the court, and how much movement is central to her game. So I wasn't necessarily surprised because I think we talked about it. I thought maybe she was going to retire at this tournament at the end of the last podcast because there'd been so little of her on the tennis court recently, and she was playing the doubles there that made me think maybe this was a little bit of a final hurrah. But I mean, I'll put the question to you both. I mean, she has obviously won 2 Grand Slams. Is there like a particular memory of Simona that particularly stands out for either of you, or what do you think her crowning achievement is on that long list of resume that she has?
I still think it's that Wimbledon final against Serena Williams. A stat I didn't realize that I found out the other day. She committed 3 unforced errors in that final, which
As
is
many
the
as Kim
lowest.
did in par for the courts.
It's the lowest ever number of unforced errors a player has ever given away in a final, and it just shows I think the
Wow.
level that she was able to play at her very best. And I just remember the just how ruthless that final was, because I remember going into it thinking this is Serena Williams's chance to once again break the Margaret Court record, but Halep had other ideas. And I was in the grounds, I remember, at Wimbledon that day, and I was watching it I think on like court 2 that had opened it up with the match on the screen, and everyone was just almost like in a state of shock with how well Halep was playing, how well she was coping with the Serena Williams serve. And yeah, it just reminded me, I think, of just how good a player she was on her day. And it makes me sad to think that, this is how it ends, a 6-1, 6-1 loss to Bronzetti. That's not a way for a 2-time Grand Slam champion to go out.
Yeah, I think that is also my overriding memory. I just was blown away by her performance that day. It was just one of the singular matches I do remember from the last, say, 10 years of watching tennis is that particular match because it was so impressive. And I think also the fact that she lost, 3 Grand Slam finals initially, some people might have thought, oh, she's never going to get over that finish line. But she did. And she's come away with 2 Grand Slams, being world number one. She's actually on the sort of career earnings list, the third all time on the women's list behind Serena and Venus Williams, having
Wow.
won, or made, I should say, £32 million in career earnings. So, that's
And
very,
that's
very impressive
and that's with the ban as well. I think
with the ban.
you were
Yeah.
mentioning those finals, and I have to say, the level of tennis she played against Sharapova in one of those finals, I thought that was really high quality at the French Open. But one memory I'd like to forget is when she defeated Sloane Stephens after Stephens played a great set, but she actually came back and won that in the same way that she'd lost previously against Ostapenko and some of the other sort of Grand Slam finals she'd been in. But I mean, an incredible career, obviously winning 2 of the biggest titles and the biggest title in the sport. But where does the legacy land would be a question, because I think there's hasn't been the biggest fanfare. I think it took a while for the WTA to maybe put some things out, and it does make you think that is there this question mark around the fact that that she was banned for doping, and this was for Roxa to start. It was, it did come at a time where she was changing some of her team. it was all lots of question marks that were attached to it. And I feel like we never really got necessarily the full clarity beyond the fact we know that there was a significant ban. Should we feel like she was wronged by the fact that so much of her career was potentially taken away from her above the 9 months that she was actually eventually told that she had to serve, which she already had served? And how do you think we can make sense of the legacy?
I think, yeah, I think it's tough in the sense that I feel like her legacy, because of this situation, has been tainted a little bit. I just think about Maria Sharapova in a similar sort of vein in terms of the situation that she went through towards the end of her career. And I do think kind of that time off that she had to she was forced into. It's a stark reminder, I think, of like the length of time that these players sometimes have to go through, that it can really have an impact on someone's career, because it felt, in hindsight, it was essentially, it essentially robbed her of valuable time that she ultimately wasn't able to make up. And I sort of just wonder, without this, what else could she have achieved? But sadly, it feels like it put a stop on her career. And I still think there has to be a little, there's a little taint there for me. I don't necessarily maybe think it's as big as maybe like Maria Sharapova, but
Ooh.
I do think there's still a taint there.
That is interesting, because I would
I
probably
would,
you go, Kim, in terms of I was going to say
as a different sort of doping, wasn't Sharapova? She was taking the same substance for a long time, and it was sort of then became illegal. Whereas with Simona Halep, if you believe her, that it was a contaminated supplement that I think she'd only started taking since she changed into Mouratoglou's team. So that the implication is that she was clean when she won all those slams and sort of in the heyday of her competing, shall we say. So it's not something that she had taken her whole career that we know of, obviously.
So how would you compare it to Sharapova?
I would say Sharapova's is more tainted because she was taking this thing long term.
That's
but then
interesting.
It was a thing.
It wasn't banned before that,
was
so
legal. So that is
that's the question mark. I think so much of it comes down to what you can believe and what the intention is when it comes to this. And so on paper, it was pretty much the same offence, you'd have to say, in terms of the length of time that was served. And whether you believe it was an oversight on Sharapova's part, or whether you believe that it was an oversight, the contamination story, contaminated with integrity. I think all we can say is that both players tested positive, and so it's not a victory for clean athletes, the latter part of their career at that moment. And when we say robbed of those years, it also very much depends on where you stand on the doping side of things, that if someone tests positive, you have to take it seriously, but it doesn't mean that necessarily it was intentional. We've seen a lot of cases like that recently. But again, a lot of people loved watching her play tennis. We've loved watching her play at some of those big, big moments. She's been such a fixture, a player who really pushed Serena Williams and Sharapova, Azarenka. They're all in the mix of some of the fantastic sort of finals and semi-finals that we remember over the years.
Do you think she underachieved with only 2 Grand Slam titles?
I don't think that she did. I think she probably maximized her talent, Some of the players that she played against had that probably level above her. But then on that day at Wimbledon, she was able to do something really extraordinary. So I think walking away with 2 slams, I think she'd be probably quite content with that. Maybe not so content with losing to Ostapenko. There's a few ones early in the career where maybe there could have been a few more wins. But overall, I mean, finishing 3rd on the all-time prize money ranking, leaderboard, I think it's a very, very illustrious career.
Yeah, I think that's a good note to end it on. The numbers don't lie, and there will always be a slight question mark, but ultimately, she's had a fantastic career, and that should be honoured, rightfully so.